let's get started. And Torben, you, the maker of things.
Maker of things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You talked to me about that, and there's a special quality to these things. They all sort of share something. The
The making of things is, there's it could be so many different things, and a lot of that comes from the necessity to make a living and being able to manipulate tools in some fashion. But I think the greatest body of my work was in the entertainment industry for touring sets or things that have to travel, and consequently they have to be able to come apart and get packed into a truck and survive thousands of miles of vibration across the highways, and then get put back together again in a short time in some distant place, and be the same as it was, 48 hours ago or 24 hours ago sometimes.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to Backstage, our Antioch Alumni Chapter Series on theater and performance with alumnus Torben Torp Smith and 70. And as you'll see, it's impossible to find any single word for his work. And Sarah Albertson, who is a teacher, an actor, and director.
I wanted to first dip into Antioch. I think that's where we all have a special interest. And I just wondered, what made you a good candidate for Antioch?
Well, that's really I've we've talked about that before, and I think it's really a uh, a question that's best posed to the administration of Antioch.
Well, it's probably an essay you wrote
Yeah,
to get
I
in.
the thing I remember most about the essay that I did write was that I was no stranger to work, and that I was not afraid to get my hands dirty. And I think the idea of work and having been involved in work situations was right along the lines of the tradition of Antioch, coming from the Horace Mann uh, idea about education, and that the purpose of education was to foster people who could participate in the workforce. So I guess if there was one thing to say, that would be it.
Yeah, you told me you couldn't wait to be an adult.
I couldn't wait to be an adult. Yeah.
College
Yeah.
is the
Yeah, I grew up in middle central Michigan in the 60s, and we didn't have much. We didn't have television until I was 13, I think, 1960, something like that. So anyway, I spent my evenings I spent uh, at the radio trying to tune in WLS from Chicago to hear the rock and roll music on WLS, and just barely pick it up, and kind of manipulating the dial back and forth and catch something. But that whole adult world was, I didn't want to be a kid. So anyway.
yeah. Well, so you moved away to Antioch and began your life there. And tell us a little about the world of Antioch for you.
Well, it
Got
was
into the theater department.
it was a revelation in a lot of ways, because first of all, what I think first, no, it wasn't the first, but maybe the second or third semester I was there, they abolished grades. And I was like, oh, okay. And so that was really interesting. And also one of the first things that you had to do as a freshman was to go through sensitivity training and um, y- just the combination of, well, you can steer yourself through the world pretty much as you will, but here are some guidelines to keep you from screwing up the rest of the community while you're at it. So
Yeah, good point. So you started out as an art major, you thought, and then gazed across to a warm theater where people were entering.
yeah, I was making wrought iron stuff, and they had a small coal-fired forge that stood outside the art building on the south side. And so I was out there one snowy, wintry day, freezing my ass off, and looking across at the theater building and seeing all these people going in there. And I had had some theater experience when I was in high school, and I thought, well, maybe that's a warmer place to be over there.
So tell us a little of your encounters, your mentors. You have some wonderful stories about Paul, and
Yeah,
your
yeah. Paul was really, eh, his classes were at 8 o'clock in the morning, so he made you get up, and to go to class. And he he followed a 4-hour sleep schedule, so two 4-hour periods to make up the 8 hours, 1 to 4 in the afternoon after classes and before rehearsals, and 1 to 4 in the morning after performance and before class. So roaming around in the middle of the night after going to get donuts and just kind of like wandering the streets. I'd go by Paul's house and see the lights on in the basement, and he was down there with a pot of coffee and watching the morning news on TV. And so I'd go and rap on his window, and he'd let me in and give me a cup of coffee and talk to me about stuff. And I can't remember any particulars of our discussions, but it was just he was just really, both he and Dal and uh, Jimmy Rose, they were all very, very accessible people. And
yeah,
so,
we talked about how they gave us room to discover, um, wonderful a way of teaching and not leading, or instructing.
and you could discover your own relationship to the world, uh, without being told how you should relate. So
Tell us about the um, one of your co-op jobs in McCarter Theater.
I was there for 2 seasons at McCarter. The first one, that the jobs that were offered at McCarter Theater were of being an usher. And I didn't want to be an usher, but I knew that they had a scene shop, and I proposed that that they could take me on in the scene shop, which somehow they agreed to. And so I spent that would have been winter of 65, I guess. Yeah. Winter 65 in Princeton. Uh, and working just horrendous hours. I think at one time we worked 60 hours straight,
Mm.
uh,
Woo!
with small breaks, and sometimes we would go out to the diner on the highway and have breakfast at 4 in the morning. You know.
Well, you talked a little about the stage at McCarter, and you snuck in and
Oh yeah,
tell us
yeah,
about.
yeah. That well, the stage there had a prop box, downstage center, and you could get in there from the traps underneath the stage, and so one time they had the theater was used as a tryout stage, and I'm not sure whether this was a tryout or not, but they had Igor Stravinsky come to conduct, I think, his final requiem, uh, that he had written, and so I I snuck in, under the stage and into the prompt box and was looking up at Igor Stravinsky's back
Mm.
as he conducted this requiem. So that was
If
a
you turned
memorable.
around, you would have seen your head popped up, I
Yeah.
guess. Oh, that's really something. Um, just getting back to Antioch, you want to name a few of the folks that you really worked, fellow students you worked with,
Well,
and also you taught a course. Tell us about that too.
yeah, well, but, my cohorts, if you will, were Roger Babb was a
Oh,
close friend. I consider a close friend, and Mark Zweifack, John Solo, Jonathan Zimmerman was, I think, my. We weren't uh, in the same dorm together, Jonathan. Yeah, I think that's how it was. Yeah, and uh,
I was fascinated by what you were doing. So I hung around. It was fun.
yeah. So, yeah.
And Michael Fagan, did did you work
uh,
on a class with him, or I'm not sure I got it
I
right, but
didn't I didn't really work directly with him, but yeah, he was an influence because I loved the stuff that he was doing, and
what was he doing?
as I recall, he was doing mostly dance stuff,
Mm.
dance type performance stuff, and I think he later became a muralist, uh, which I also thought was fascinating.
Well,
But
I think you mentioned his name in relation to a class you taught in 1969.
oh well, that yeah, because he had done this piece that was, about a traffic crossing, or a stoplight crossing, where people would be lined up on on either side of the stage, and then they would, in random fashion, sort of mingle across stage and pass each other and go across this way, and then they would turn around, and different patterns of people kind of coming together and separating, and uh, so there was this whole idea of what they called happenings was going on at the time, and it was about these random things that happen. I think one of the things that the current version of that, as near as I can recall, would be something they call flash mobs,
Yeah,
where people just sort of randomly show up, and stuff happens, and then they go away, and
yeah, yeah. Great. So you created a class in that. I
yeah.
know students were creating classes and teaching them. I did. I took an auto mechanics class once, and I don't remember who taught it, but so you did one on happenings.
On happenings, and it was about um, it was about random. It wasn't about the idea of things being scripted. Quite almost the opposite. Um, so I guess instructions were given about certain things to do, like walk this line 20 paces, turn around 3 times, and walk to the
Mhm.
right, or sprinkle this colored powder on the snow uh, in this spot, and then walk, you know. So different people were given different sorts of instruction and about how to
Mm.
move and what to do while they were moving, but nobody else knew what the other persons were going to do. So it was random in
Yeah.
that sense.
There's a question that's a good one. Was it Susan? I don't know. Um, about Roger Babb's group and whether you were ever connected, in what way, or
No,
why you joined
I
them.
was not connected with Otrabanda. I wish I wish then and sort of wish now that I had been. Uh, they were doing some really what I thought was groundbreaking stuff about bringing performance to places where it had not been. Um,
Of these,
Yeah.
these
it,
in the first year.
yeah,
it may have timed with your connection to Denmark. And I think maybe you were away a lot of that time, and we might turn to your year abroad. And that kind of segues us into the beginnings of your multifaceted career. You want to talk a little about your year abroad? And
sure, yeah. So my father was from Denmark, and so the it was kind of a no-brainer for me to choose Denmark as a place to go to study. Plus, the places that you could go to were these folk high schools, and they had several. One was a school that taught teachers for. It was a school for teaching industrial arts, sort of cabinet making and metal work, more like sort of you know um, small metal work, um, bookbinding, that sort of crafty kind of stuff was. So that was the first school I went to, and uh, that was way out in the sticks, uh, and so it was it was an interesting time. That's how I taught myself to speak Danish. By There was nothing to do in the evening, so I had a book of something I thought was interesting, which was a book about uh, medieval Danish folk songs. And so I took this book and went through it page by page and word by word with a dictionary, and translated this book while I was
oh my
uh,
God.
spending my evening. I read for 2 hours every night, regardless of how much I read, but it was 2 hours of time. And
And but you had a real attachment to Denmark. You went back for a co-op job too?
yeah, well, I met some people and formed a relationship with a woman that I met there, and so I had an interest in going back for many reasons. I had a girlfriend, and I spoke Danish, and my father was Danish, so I really loved being there. So I went I went back uh, on a co-op job, just sort of ad hoc, without really a job to have, and I went around to different theaters and proposed that I work for them. and so a small theater in Copenhagen bit, and I worked at that theater called the Ballhaus Theater in Copenhagen for that semester.
Uh-huh.
So
And then you returned again
and then I returned again. Yeah,
after graduating.
yeah. I returned in 1970, I, and got married and did not have a job. Didn't know what I was doing there. I thought I had the beginnings of a possible career in set design in the States. So I didn't know what I was doing there, and was lost and without direction, and went to a concert in the summer in a park in Copenhagen. Heard some Americans talking. Was a bit homesick, and I went to talk with them, and they turned out to be the road crew for the Rolling Stones. And so I asked if I could get a job with them, and they said, "Well, go talk to this guy down where we're setting up for rehearsal." That's from a later tour. This is 1982. This is the second time I was with the Stones.
You're on the right, our right.
I'm the guy with the squeegee.
Oh, you're the one with the squeegee. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. You're working.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is one of those concerts, and this really kicked off the beginnings of your career of touring with bands.
Yeah, just working and forming connections with people who were in that industry, and
Tell us about the kind of work you characterized it as sort of grunt work, and
yeah, we used to
not the
just,
digital age and that kind of thing.
it was not the digital age for sure. And we used to when we were asked what we did, we used to say that we carried heavy things for rich people. And- which was kind of like the extent of it, really. Um,
You said, tell us about this getting up to the follow spot and what that entails.
well, at that time, that there was the first Rolling Stones tour that I was on was also the first rock and roll concert I'd ever been to. Was in Malmo, Sweden, and I was operating a follow spot, and the follow spots uh, consisted of what they call super troopers, and we had two larger ones called gladiators, and these were carbon arc spotlights, and they that was the main lighting element in the show. We had on the stage there were maybe uh, I don't know, 10 or 15, maybe there was 20 10-inch Fresnel wash lights for wash color washes, and then the rest of the performers were then spotlighted with the Super Trooper spotlights. So these things were about 7 feet long, maybe, and 15 or 16 inches in diameter, and it took 6 people to carry them. And sometimes the only reason we didn't use more people were that the stairways we had to climb up into the upper balconies were so narrow that we couldn't fit any more than 6 people around these things. And so, yeah, so that, and then you get up into the highest balcony of an auditorium. There were maybe like 2 or 3 balconies at least. And then
And
you
they
had,
must have
you
been
had to string intercom cable from those positions down to the lighting board, and it was a lot. It was a lot of work. So set up, tear it down, and that's the nature of that kind of touring work at the time. Was arrive at 7 in the morning. You'd have some breakfast. You'd start work at 8. You'd work till 4 for sound check, and then during which time you'd eat dinner, and then the show would happen, and then at 11 or midnight you'd start to tear down, and at 2 o'clock you'd get back on the bus.
Hmm.
You know.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. There's one story I just love you to share, and that's the rumble in the jungle. You mentioned that you were part of the event before that. Could you tell us a little about that?
Well, that was another serendipitous kind of event that I was involved with. We had decided to uh, take a trip to Holland, and we had borrowed an old Russian station wagon from a friend of mine, and we went to visit these people in Holland at an organic farm, and the car broke down. The generator broke on this Russian vehicle, which you could go into, but
It's another story.
that's another story. So anyway, we're kind of stuck there waiting for a part, and we decided we'd go to London, where we knew some people uh, who ran a lighting company there. And we went to London. We were staying up in their storage loft in their place in South London. And then they asked us, how'd you like to go to Africa? And we said, "Oh, okay." Well, we had no idea what it was, and it turned out to be the Rumble in the Jungle, the fight between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman. And there was to be a 3-day music festival before the fight, and that was ostensibly to entertain all of the press and the different people who came to the fight, and entertain the wealthy people who were coming into Zaire and Kinshasa. And it turned out, looking back on it, I think the whole thing was supposed to be a promotional event for the country of Zaire, ruled by the dictator Mobutu. And the stadium that we played in was brand new, had been used once before, and the event was a 9-man hanging. And so there was all this tension going on in the country, and this was to show the world that Zaire was a place where you could invest, and it was modern, and tolerant place. Anyway, so the music festival was we had uh, James Brown, Miriam Makeba, the
Mm.
Pointer Sisters, Sister Sledge, BB King. Uh, who else? A, a bunch of African American acts, and some local acts, some dance troops, and some other local bands. Anyway, when they first started taking us to the stadium, they took us the most direct route, and everyone was taking pictures of the city, and said that they apparently didn't like that, because the second day they started driving us through the embassy district where all the nice houses were.
Uh,
So anyway, it was pretty tense, hot. We had to start working at night because we couldn't work during the day. It must have been 110, 115
oh,
degrees. Um, what
And
else?
then what happened to the concert?
Oh, yeah. So at one point, George Foreman got a cut above his eye, and so the fight had to be postponed because he had to heal the cut. And so the fight was postponed for a month. But we had all this equipment there, and we didn't want it to be tied up for a month, sitting doing nothing and not earning any money in Africa. Uh, and the contract stated that the festival was to take place on these and these days, and so that was insisted on. So we played the concert a month before the fight actually happened, and so because the fight was postponed, everybody left. All the press and everybody left because there was no reason to sit around for nothing, which meant to the country that all the money was leaving. Uh, and so the first two nights, the audience was only the first two rows of seating in front of the stage, and the rest of the stadium was empty.
How big was the stadium?
It was like 50,000 people
Ah.
stadium. It was a huge stadium. And so the third night they opened it up to the populace to come in and see the show for free because they needed audience shots for the film that they were making, which was part of the whole promotional thing. Anyway, we did it. We did the festival. We packed up. We got out of there. The day after we left, they closed the borders, and nobody could leave, and we got out just in time. So,
Oh boy, what a story. Well, let's see. Are there any questions that anybody had at this point that they'd want to unmute and ask?
Yeah, Torben, what years were you on tour with the Stones?
I was my first tour with them was in 1970. It was a European tour, and the second time was also a European tour in 1982.
I think that's interesting because I toured with them, United States tour in 1972. We would both end up in that position, as I find
Oh yeah,
interesting.
Wow.
yeah.
Yes. So it sounds familiar to you.
Oh yeah, was Chip Monk still the stage manager when you were
Oh,
there?
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah, he was incredible.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a
Torben. Chipmunk, for those who don't know, is if you saw the Woodstock, the first Woodstock movie, he was the announcer from the stage, telling everyone about the brown acid with his mellifluous voice.
We were hired to document the tour, and the footage we shot was eventually released as "Ladies and Gentlemen, the Rolling Stones."
Yeah,
One of the first quadraphonic movies. It was, yeah, I know about 60-hour stretches, believe me.
yeah.
Well, there are a couple of more anecdotes, and then we're going to go to the website and look at this incredible part of your career, where you were constructing sets. But there's a couple of more that I just wanted to share. Could you? I think it was the Rolling Stones where you got beat up, and was it in Berlin? I'm not sure if that was.
No, Berlin's a different story. But
Yeah.
we were working so long that you know, exhaustion set in, and tensions rose amongst the crew, and I can't even really remember what happened, but somebody got pissed off at me for something and jumped me from behind, and so who knows what it was that I did, but
Yeah, but didn't you go into a coma?
oh, that was a totally different thing.
Oh, well, tell us about that one.
That was I I had a production company that I formed together with a couple of other people, a guy named Steve Cohen and another backstabber who I won't mention. But
Oh, we now touched on one of those places you don't want to go.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we were hired to do Christmas decorations for the Embarcadero Center in San Francisco, and so we were down there setting up to install these Christmas decorations, and the Embarcadero Center has this long walkway down in between these high-rise buildings, and in between them there are these concrete beams that stretch between the buildings and partly form part of the walkway. And one was where I was it was 30 feet down, and the other side was 15 feet down. And so I can't even remember what happened, but I ended up falling off the 15-foot side and landed on my head on the concrete, and so I cracked my skull open and was in a coma for a week, and it took me about 6 months to come back from that. So,
Wow.
but
Oh,
that's
that
that's among other different
and
injuries.
one other injury that's I'll categorize as challenges and obstacles to your career. A Bill Graham concert.
Oh,
that
it was a yeah. It was not a memorial, but a celebratory thing to celebrate Bill Graham's career, and so we were setting up some stuff, and so at 6 o'clock in the morning, I went to pick up a friend of mine on the top of Potrero Hill to go to work, and it was dark in the winter, and I just went in and said, "Let's go," and came back out, and thinking it would be weird if someone was in my car, which I had not locked because I was just going in and out. And sure enough, there was somebody in my car, and who I made the mistake of chasing this person. And at the bottom of the hill, he turned around and fired at me with a pistol and hit me. So,
God,
so I got shot in the leg.
you began a career of building touring sets, and we're going to just glide through some of your accomplishments here. And can you just briefly tell us a little as we scroll?
Yeah, this is a set that I designed for Ronnie James Dio, who was had been the lead singer of Black Sabbath, and this was an 18-foot tall from the stage up dragon, and the upper part was hydraulically operated and articulated neck and head, and in the lower right corner you see the machine that ran the hydraulic machine that ran the dragon. Uh, so there was a bunch of different. It was Dungeons and Dragons time. So,
Oh,
and then this is
One.
a set. This is a set I designed for Stevie Wonder, and this was kind of novel, and it was built to uh, sort of mimic the look of a CD player, which was just becoming the means of music transmission at the time. It was a 40-foot turntable with an 18-foot turntable on top for all Stevie's keyboard gear. And the set was assembled at one end of the auditorium while the lights were being assembled. When the lights raised up, then we rolled the whole thing on wheels from one end of the stadium to the arena to the other underneath the lights. So, and then this is a similar construction turntable stage that we built for a Budweiser concert tour.
And so this was broken down and transported to the area.
Yeah, so
Performance area.
all the aluminum framing that you see underneath was put together and held together with cross braces, and then all the deck pieces were laid on top of that, so you could break the whole thing down and put it into carts and roll it up into a truck. That's just a fun little set I did for Morris Day, who was one of the characters in Purple Rain with Prince. and he had a concert tour after that.
And
Madonna's first tour. We built this, didn't design that, but built the set for it. And this is LL Cool J, which we did not design this one either, but we built it. That's our one part of our shop where we assembled everything.
David Bowie.
David Bowie, yeah. This was a Glass Spider. This was a collaborative event with a couple of different shops building parts of this thing because it was too much for one shop. We built the spider head and the antennae and the jaws that move back and forth. And above the two big eyes on the spider head is you see a rectangular part. That's an elevator that raised David up to perform on top of the spider head.
What are the transparent pieces that look like legs? Am I seeing that right?
At the bottom,
Yeah.
the supports for it, or
I'm not seeing. This is what the what you're seeing here is the underneath the white spider head is the lighting rig. So this is the lighting rig that's in a lowered position. So all of that got raised up 20 feet in the air.
I see. Great.
But what are the legs for the spider made out of?
Oh, that's those are jaws, actually, spider jaws, and those are aluminum tubing that got bent and welded together.
Excuse me while I go to the next one.
This is some event stuff. I did the sets for the Bay Area Music Awards for 6 or 7 years, and that was the first one that I did. So you do these things. This is the Bohemian Club out in the Grove up along the Russian River.
Did you see Henry Kissinger pissing on a tree?
No, we weren't there. We were there before the encampment, but we certainly heard about stuff like that.
But what's interesting here is that you had to protect those redwoods. You couldn't put anything into them, right?
Yeah. So we supported all this with steel bands that wrapped around and clamped onto the trees, and the steel bands had hooks or eyes that we hooked into rigging stuff that then supported the scenery around them.
Sarah or somebody, I don't think anybody outside the Bay Area would know what the Bohemian Grove was.
Oh yeah, well, the Bohemian Grove is a gentleman's club. And it's there's all kinds of, it's an encampment, I think, that comes out of the 20s and perhaps, and many presidents have been members, and the different members have different camps. The Bohemian Grove is 5,000 acres up along the Russian River, and the different camps, it could be a couple of pup tents with a cooler, or it could be a massive platformed area with servants and marble showers, and so there were many. That's like the Bechtel camp is. So this is a a PBS production with Tony Bennett and Katie Lang at the Fairmont Hotel. And all of the backdrop and background scenery, that's all aluminum door screen that is unpainted, just plain aluminum screening that catches light and changes color with light just beautifully. and it's formable, so you can make, you see the swooping sort of drapery-like stuff, that's all aluminum door screen. The clouds along the top edge, that's all aluminum door screen, everything.
Oh,
And we had to, the challenge here was to design the rigging for all of this stuff so that I mean, the Fairmont Hotel is a historic building, so you can't damage or mar any way any of the existing buildings. So we had to find ways to hook all of this on to the balconies and without screwing things up.
Wow.
This is a movie called Pacific Heights with Michael Keaton was in it, and who was the woman?
Did you write it here anywhere? No. Well, what you created the siding for
Yeah,
this?
so this house is up on Texas and 19th Street on Potrero Hill in San Francisco, and so we had to make this nicely painted house look like an old rundown house, and so we applied sticky back paper to the siding, and then painted the sticky back paper to look like it was old and funky, and
Wow.
added some different architectural elements, like beneath the windows, the starburst patterns were created to look like the starburst patterns above the windows, so the same theme. And those are still on there today, I think, and iron
you're-
railing and different stuff. So, and
So
then
the before and after would have been opposite.
yeah, so you see the couple acquiring this old rundown house, and then they fix it up, so then we tear the paper off and it's freshly painted underneath. Oh yeah, this is a Safeway grocery store chain promotional event for the world's longest picnic table for the Guinness Book of World Records. We built a modular construction so we could bring it to the Marina Green and click all this picnic table elements together. So this is 305 feet and 3 inches long.
Um,
But
and
this points out, all of these things that you see are all parts of essentially just trying to make a living. So you do things.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes you do things that you absolutely do not want to do.
I'm just and I'm just showing here a puppet that you constructed at San Francisco State. We didn't get to touch in on your sets for theater, but they're on the website. And I just love you dancing with the puppet.
What did you do when you were at Antioch? I remember something outside with Roger, something of Fleet Street. I don't know. There was a big outdoor production, but I
Oh
don't.
yeah, well I did a set for the Tempest in the
Yeah, then I wasn't there.
in the amphitheater. That was in '68. It got almost built. I think there's a drawing of that on the website. We got almost built, and then there was the student strike in summer of 1968, and so everything, or maybe it was spring, but anyway, everything ground to a halt, and it was never completed. Other
Wow.
stuff I did with Roger was I did a set for the Caretaker, a Pinter play.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Is that the one Dal was in?
no, that was JB.
Well, yeah. But I thought he was also in a Pinter play.
He was in Caretaker Inside,
Uh-huh.
but I don't know whether that might have been, that was probably in 60, 64, 65.
Hmm.
The caretaker
be
my
about the
father was
right-
in.
It was, I didn't know that he was in, yeah, I can't remember who
There
played
was
the-
another one that a production of Caretaker that you know, Graham Paul was in.
Mhm.
Oh,
played the,
yeah, that was
old
Graham
man.
Paul. He played the old man, and
Yeah, yeah,
Roger was the young man. Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's the one that I did, yeah.
Do you remember the rest?
Drawn a bit of a blank. I did some stuff in the workshop theater. I did a show called Hello from Bertha. Terry, do you remember Hello from Bertha?
I
Were you in
do.
that?
No, I
Yeah.
wasn't in it, but I
You
do.
weren't in it, yeah,
Yes, I wasn't in it, but I saw it. Yeah.
yeah.
I think is that a Tennessee Williams one act or something?
I think so, yeah. Drawn a
Torben,
blank.
Torben, what was it? Was you graduated in set design? Is that what you?
70.
Yeah, art and set design, yeah.
So key.
Sculpture and set design, yeah.
And what sort of way did Antioch prepare you or not prepare you towards your all the things that followed after? Making things work, or
I think a lot of my just stagecraft experience was important. I mean, I learned a lot of stuff on the rock and roll touring. That was mostly lighting stuff. So I learned a lot of stuff that I did not know uh, about lighting and so on tour with bands. But as far as what I learned at Antioch, it was mostly stagecraft, building of scenery. When I worked at McCarter Theater, we worked with stage hands and stage carpenters from Local One out of New York, and so I learned a lot from those guys about. And this is the old days of how to build scenery with clinch nails and amyl glue and all of that sort of stuff that no longer exists.
But I think also so many of the people who've been in this series, Antioch kind of prepares you to recognize opportunities,
Yeah, yeah,
grasp them, and make do, right? If you don't
yeah,
have a job,
absolutely.
you
Yeah,
do something that turns into a job.
yeah, you do something that turns into a job, or you're asked to do something that is a job, even though you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
To- Yeah, to recognize possibilities and opportunities. That's a really good point.
Yeah,
The imagination.
yeah, and then your experience shows you. I mean, just the idea of all of the thousands and thousands of different kinds of fasteners and mechanical connections that exist in the industrial world, and we live on a vast industrial base, and people lose sight of that sometimes, how huge and intricate this whole industrial base that we live in is.
Mm.
So
And also, I think Antioch um, inspired flexibility,
yeah,
that ability to see opportunity and then and be able to shift. And
yeah, and yeah, morph actually is
More-
an appropriate word, I think, you know.
yeah.
So Barry, you put a couple of questions in the chat. Do you want to ask them?
I was wondering if you had had any experience with the Exploratorium, the science museum here in San Francisco that has a big shop and lots
Yeah,
of,
I I knew the people that worked there, and I did a couple of small things like, you know, building some some boxes or something, like that. But
Mhm.
I never was deeply involved with that.
Yeah, yeah.
What's that latest project you're doing, Torben?
Oh, I just actually finished that and
What
delivered.
is,
It was a scale model of a Gutenberg style printing press
Mm,
Mm.
that I
Mm.
built, and I have an Instagram channel called 449 Utah, and so that there's a picture of it on there. So,
and also the parquet.
oh yeah, the parklet for so it's outdoor seating for a restaurant called the Anchor Oyster Bar
Oh,
on Castro Street.
oh, you did that. I love
Yeah,
that.
I did that together with a friend of mine. Yeah.
Your story about twisting the dial to find WLS reminded me that when we were in high school, Jessica and I were big fans of Wolfman Jack in
Oh
Texas, Del Rio, Texas.
yeah.
We would do that same, and probably most of us had that experience during that high school, junior high period of wherever we were trying to get that rock and roll.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was if I remember correctly, that was probably before FM radio, and it was
Mhm.
all AM
Mhm.
radio, trying to just find that little wavelength.
Right. Mhm.
Do you have kids and have they followed in your footsteps?
Do I have kids and did they follow in my? I have a son. He did not follow in my footsteps. He's a computer scientist and a software engineer.
Mm.
In Denmark.
Yeah, he lives
Oh.
in Denmark. Yeah.
Carrying on that tradition.
Yeah, and he has two daughters. One is just turned 17, and the other is 12.
Did you have any kind of interaction with Madonna, David Bowie, Stevie Wonder, any of those
Well,
famous?
yeah, with not so much with Madonna. I met her, but I didn't really interact with her too much.
Michigander.
Stevie Wonder, I met when I presented my model for the stage design that I built for them. So I met with him for about an hour. David Bowie, I spent a month with David Bowie in Berlin. David Bowie was a mentor of Iggy Pop. And, James Osterberg is his name, a Danish kid. His dad, Jimmy's dad, was a math teacher at the University of Michigan, and so anyway, so Jimmy was kind of having trouble with being addicted to drugs, and so David helped him get cleaned up, and he created an album called The Idiot, and then he had a tour that was through Europe, and we spent a month rehearsing in Berlin at the film studios and the showing room of the film studios where Hitler's propaganda films had been produced. So and David was the keyboard player, but he was not presented at all. He was just the guy in the shadow in the back, and it was all a big secret that he was on the tour. So yeah, I spent time with him and a couple of other people. Van Morrison, I spent a bunch of time with, and
Did you do a lot of drugs?
we won't go there.
Oh,
Was it yes?
Torben,
well,
when you, I just, the concert of Rumble in the Jungle was just such an incredible group of performers, when you were doing the lights, could you also enjoy the performances? I mean, was it an amazing thing to listen to? Or
That's a difficult question because, yeah, I mean, I recognize that it was kind of a prime event, and yeah, but it was, it was work. It was work, and it was just highly.
There's a lot
That's
there.
an yeah, that's an interesting question because, Mark Twain writes about in Life on the Mississippi. He talks about his enjoyment early on, his enjoyment of the different things that happened on the Mississippi River, the dawn and the ripple of current around that particular tree and the colors and everything. But after he became a riverboat captain, he had a completely different take on all of that stuff. That ripple meant that there might be a snag there that was going to catch the boat, and that color of dawn meant that the weather was going to be changing and so on. So
Right.
yeah, a completely different take. So, and that's how it's hard for me to go to a I don't like to go to concerts because I'm not working. And so, yeah, I mean, to enjoy music, I just listen to it in my living room,
so the work is so primary and so complex, just like the Mississippi must have been as complex as being a Mississippi riverboat captain. So there's not that much bandwidth left over to aesthetically enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, of course I enjoy a a well done performance, but that is rare, I think, um,
You mean
because
you
there's so
spot
many.
stuff that goes wrong or
Yeah, there's
could
stuff that
be it
goes wrong,
better?
or things that are kind of done out of place, or that's the kind of things that I notice. I've seen just horrible productions of Chekhov's The Seagull, and I've seen you know uh, completely uplifting performances of the same show, and uh, so
Mm,
I notice that kind of thing.
mm,
The whole progress of the arc of the story, how smoothly integrated it is, and how the resolution happens, and the same thing in music, I suppose. I think
mm.
that the greatest music experience I had was the first time I heard the Mahavishnu Orchestra. I was driving the truck for a European tour, and I had no idea who this was. It just that it was fusion jazz, something or other, and I I had been in the lobby, and the show started, and was walking down the aisle, and they started playing this. It's hard to even describe. It was just like an amazing musical experience.
Mm.
But so things like that happen, but a lot of times it's just work.
Speaking of memoirs and autobiographies, I highly recommend Pete Townshend's of The Who,
Yeah.
because it's very thickly woven into of music and music that he tries to hear and music that he tries to create. And he goes into such detail that it's, I mean, for me, who's stupid about music, it was really fascinating.
Yeah. Okay. I'll look that up.
Thank you, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Sarah,
All of you.
Torben.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
I just have
Just-
one final word, and that is, like about Antioch, and how it leads you to discover and to try, and part of that trying is finding stuff that does not work.
Mm.
like Otra Banda, for example, Susan, you'll remember like the performance of stump removal. Didn't really kind of catch on very well. You know?
Not on the river. They walked out
Yeah.
on us.
Yeah. What the hell is that?
Who are those guys?
Yeah.
Stump removal.
But they
So-
loved
I
the
had
stuff we
forgotten
did
the
there.
term.
Yeah, they like the
Oh,
musical
boy.
stuff we did before that.
Yeah. So you find
Okay.
what works and what doesn't work, and that's how you make your living.
Yeah, yep. Okay. Goodbye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Take
everyone.
care. Bye-bye. See you next
Thanks.
time.
Wonderful.
you.
Wonderful.